Ethan looked at her steadily. Growth isn't the enemy. No, she said softly. Distance is. He took her hands. I don't need you to choose Charleston tomorrow. I just need to know we're choosing each other. She searched his face. I am choosing you, she said. But for the first time, doubt flickered between certainty and ambition. The offer. 2 weeks later, Naomi called Clara into her office. We're expanding West Coast operations, she said. I want you here permanently. Permanent. The word echoed louder than any Pacific wave. Clara's pulse quickened. This is a career-defining move, Naomi added. Think about it. No. Then what are you asking? He hesitated. I'm asking if you see your future there, or somewhere else. Clara didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, Los Angeles was changing her. Not replacing Charleston, but expanding her. She loved the pace, the creative energy, the possibility, and for the first time, she wondered if going back would feel like shrinking. The fault line. On his final night before returning to Charleston, they stood at Santa Monica Pier, waves crashing below. I'm scared, Clara admitted. Of what? That we're growing in different directions. He hated that distance created space for doubt. The visit. 3 months into Clara's stay, Ethan flew to Los Angeles. She met him at the airport, heart racing as soon as she saw him walking toward her. The reunion felt electric. Familiar arms, familiar scent, familiar warmth. They spent the weekend exploring the city together, walking beneath the skyline, hiking up to the observatory in Griffith Observatory, standing side by side overlooking the vast city lights. It's beautiful, Ethan admitted. But, Clara prompted, but it doesn't feel like home. She leaned into him. Home is a moving target. Not for me, he said quietly. She looked at him. What does that mean? It means I'm building something in Charleston. And I don't know where we fit long term. The words hung heavier than the city air. Are you asking me to come back? She asked. The new friend. In Los Angeles, Clara met Daniel Park, a travel writer assigned to collaborate with her on a feature about coastal communities. Daniel was charming, articulate, easy to talk to. Too easy. They spent long days driving along Highway 1, photographing fishing towns and cliffside views. They shared creative frustrations and late dinners after shoots. One evening, while editing photos together, Daniel asked casually, "Are you seeing anyone back home?" Clara didn't hesitate. Yes. He nodded, respectful but observant. Long distance is hard. It is, she admitted. But you're still here. The comment unsettled her more than she expected. That night, she called Ethan and told him about Daniel immediately. Not because she had to. Because she wanted transparency. Ethan listened quietly. Do you trust him? He asked. I trust myself, she replied. He exhaled softly. That's enough. But after the call ended, jealousy crept in, quiet, unwelcome. The storm at home. Back in Charleston, hurricane season arrived early. Ethan worked 12-hour days reinforcing shoreline barriers near Folly Beach. The sky turned bruised purple as forecasts predicted landfall. The night the storm hit, winds tore through the coast with violent precision. Ethan stood in the command center, watching live footage of waves slamming into temporary reinforcements his team had installed. For a moment, fear wasn't about infrastructure. It was about fragility, of buildings, of love, of promises made across time zones. He texted Clara during a break. Storm's bad. We're holding for now. Her reply came instantly. Please be careful. I hate that I'm not there. He stared at the screen. You don't have to be everywhere to matter. But even as he sent it, he wondered whether distance was quietly reshaping them. Reinvention. The magazine office was located near downtown, in a glass building that reflected the skyline. Her editor, Naomi, moved fast, spoke faster, and expected brilliance. We want emotion, Naomi told her during the first meeting. Not just landscapes. Show me what California feels like. Clara threw herself into the work. She photographed sunrise surfers in Malibu, neon signs flickering along Sunset Boulevard, quiet mornings in Griffith Park where the city softened under fog. Everywhere she turned, LA felt like a performance. People chasing something. Fame, art, escape. It reminded her of a younger version of herself. At night, she called Ethan. How's the Pacific? He asked once. louder than Charleston. And you? She hesitated. Louder too. He smiled through the phone. That's not a bad thing. But sometimes their calls ended too quickly. Sometimes exhaustion replaced conversation. And sometimes silence lingered a second too long. Part 3. The distance between oceans. Settings: Los Angeles and Charleston. Los Angeles felt nothing like Charleston. The air in LA was dry instead of heavy, scented with asphalt and citrus instead of salt and magnolia. The ocean along the Pacific stretched wide and dramatic, crashing harder than the Atlantic ever did. The sky seemed larger somehow, less intimate, more cinematic. Clara stepped out of the airport into a city that hummed with ambition. Palm trees lined the roads like tall exclamation points. Traffic pulsed endlessly. Billboards towered overhead, promising reinvention. For the first time in months, she felt small again. And strangely alive. The first goodbye. At Charleston International Airport, the air felt heavy with unspoken fears. Clara held her boarding pass too tightly. I don't want us to become phone calls and missed texts, she said. We won't, Ethan replied. We'll become effort. She smiled through tears. That sounds exhausting. It is, he admitted. But so is losing something good. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. Clara stepped forward, then turned back. Ethan? Yeah? Don't close your heart again while I'm gone. He swallowed. I won't. Just don't forget your way back. She kissed him once, soft, lingering, intentional. Then she walked toward security. Ethan stood there long after she disappeared from view. For the second time in his life, he felt the sharp edge of distance. But this time, there was hope threaded through it. The decision. On the final night before her deadline, they stood barefoot at the edge of the Atlantic. Moonlight shimmered across the water. I don't want to leave, she admitted. Ethan's voice was steady. Then don't, but I don't want to stay because I'm scared. He stepped closer. Then go because you're brave. Tears burned in her eyes. You're not fighting me on this. I'm fighting for you. The distinction changed everything. Clara understood then what real love felt like. Not possession, not pressure, support. The next morning, she accepted the Los Angeles offer. 6 months. Temporary, but real. When she told Ethan, he pulled her into his arms without hesitation. This isn't goodbye, he whispered against her hair. It better not be. He kissed her like someone who knew love wasn't guaranteed, but worth choosing anyway. The distance between courage and fear. The Los Angeles offer came with a deadline. Clara had 2 weeks to decide. She began photographing Charleston obsessively, as if trying to preserve it. Sunrise over the harbor. Children running along the shoreline. Ethan standing on the pier at dusk, unaware she was capturing him in silhouette. One evening, as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, she showed him the photo. You look like you're waiting for something, she said. Maybe I am. For what? For the moment I stop being afraid to lose you. Her breath caught. You think loving me means losing me? I think loving anyone means risking it. The honesty between them felt fragile but powerful. Clara realized something then. She wasn't afraid of Los Angeles. She was afraid of repeating history. Choosing ambition over connection. Or worse, choosing connection and losing herself. Recognition flickered across his face. Shock followed. Maya? Clara felt the shift instantly. Maya was from Chicago, a mutual friend of Ethan's late fiancé. I didn't know you moved, Maya said gently. I heard after, everything. The word hung unfinished. Everything. Clara stood quietly, heart pounding. Ethan introduced her. This is Clara. Maya's eyes softened with understanding. Later that night, driving home in silence, Clara finally asked, You never told me her name. Ethan gripped the steering wheel. Her name was Emily. It was the first time he had spoken it aloud in Charleston. Clara felt both honored and unsettled. Do you still love her? She asked carefully. He didn't answer immediately. I will always love who she was, he said finally. But that love doesn't look like the future anymore. And what does the future look like? He glanced at her. Terrifying. And possible. The words felt familiar. Too familiar. I don't want us to become a sacrifice either, she said. He took her hand. Clara, if what we have is real, 6 months won't erase it. She wanted to believe that. But love, she had learned, didn't always disappear loudly. Sometimes it faded quietly under distance. The name he avoided. A few nights later, they attended a small gathering hosted by one of Ethan's coworkers. It was the first time Clara saw him in a professional setting, confident, respected, composed. Halfway through the evening, a woman approached them. "Ethan Walker?" she asked cautiously. He turned. The photograph. A week later, Clara received an email that shifted everything. A major travel magazine based in Los Angeles wanted to feature her photography in a summer issue, if she was willing to relocate temporarily for 6 months. 6 months. On the other side of the country. Her hands trembled as she read the message again. This was the opportunity she had dreamed about when she first picked up a camera. National exposure. Real momentum. But Charleston wasn't just home anymore. It was Ethan. She waited until evening to tell him. They were sitting at Waterfront Park, the pineapple fountain glowing softly under lamplight. "That's incredible," he said immediately. She searched his face for hesitation. "You don't sound surprised." "I've seen your work," he replied. "You were always going to outgrow small galleries." "And Charleston?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I don't want to be the reason you say no." Building against the water. Ethan's work grew more demanding. His firm had secured a coastal restoration contract near Folly Beach, reinforcing infrastructure threatened by rising tides and storm surges. The project mattered, not just professionally, but personally. "Coastal cities are fragile," he told Clara one evening, spreading blueprints across her kitchen table. "You don't see the erosion at first. It happens slowly. Then one day, something gives." She leaned against the counter, watching him. "You talk about cities like they're people. Maybe they are." She crossed the room and rested her hands on the table beside his plans. "And what happens when something gives? You rebuild smarter." He looked up then, and the weight in his eyes wasn't about architecture. It was about loss. Clara stepped closer. "You don't have to rebuild alone," she said quietly. For a moment, Ethan forgot to breathe. Part 2, Tides That Don't Ask Permission. Setting. Charleston. Love in Charleston moved like the tide, slow, deliberate, and powerful when it chose to be. Clara began measuring her days differently. Not by sunrise photos or editing deadlines, but by whether she would see Ethan before nightfall. They slipped into each other's routines without announcement. Saturday mornings meant coffee near King Street. Sunday afternoons meant long walks along Sullivan's Island. Wednesday evenings meant takeout eaten on Clara's porch while cicadas hummed in the trees. It felt steady, which scared her, because the last time something felt steady, it had collapsed without warning. The beginning of something fragile. Love didn't crash into them. It unfolded, in shared coffee, in long walks, in quiet moments where neither felt the need to impress the other. Clara found herself smiling more easily. Ethan found himself breathing more deeply. One evening, as they watched the sunset bleed into the ocean, Clara turned to him. "Are we being reckless?" she asked. "Maybe," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "I don't feel reckless." "Neither do I." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss tasted like salt air and cautious courage. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't overwhelming. It was intentional. And in that quiet corner of Charleston, beneath a sky streaked in orange and rose, two people who had once believed love had failed them began to consider that maybe, just maybe, it was beginning again. The confession. It happened a week later. They were walking along the beach at twilight when Ethan stopped. "I should tell you something," he said. Clara's heartbeat quickened. "My fiancé died 3 years ago." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once. "I don't talk about it much." "You don't have to. I want to. With you." She didn't know why that meant so much, but it did. "I don't want to be someone who replaces a memory," Clara said carefully. "You wouldn't," he replied. "No one could." Silence settled gently. Then he added, "But I also don't want my life to end at 29. Her chest tightened. "I think," she said softly, "that loving again doesn't erase what came before. It just proves your heart survived." He looked at her like she'd just handed him something sacred. And for the first time since he arrived in Charleston, Ethan felt the faint outline of hope. Ethan was already there. Guess Charleston wanted drama today, he shouted over the wind. Thunder cracked across the sky. For a moment, the world narrowed to rain and noise and closeness. They stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the small shelter at the end of the pier. Lightning illuminated the water. Clara glanced at him, and saw something raw flicker across his face. Fear. Not of the storm. Of memory. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. He stiffened for half a second. Then he held on. Rain pounded against the wooden boards. Waves slammed harder than usual. But beneath the chaos, something steadied between them. Not passion. Not yet. Understanding. When the storm softened into drizzle, neither of them let go immediately. Clara found herself telling him things she hadn't told anyone. About her failed engagement. About the slow erosion of feeling unseen. About choosing herself for the first time. Ethan listened more than he spoke. But when he did speak, his words felt deliberate. I think people mistake comfort for love, he said one night as they sat on a bench near the water. Clara studied him. That sounds personal. He exhaled slowly. It is. He didn't elaborate. She didn't press. Not yet. The storm, the first storm of the season, rolled in unexpectedly. Dark clouds swallowed the sky in the late afternoon. The wind shifted sharp and sudden. Clara had been photographing the shoreline when rain began to fall, hard and fast. She ran toward the pier for cover. He hadn't spoken her name out loud in over a year. He had tried to stay in the same apartment afterward. Tried to keep the same job. The same routines. But grief lingered in the corners of familiar rooms. So when the Charleston opportunity appeared, he took it without hesitation. New city, new air, maybe a new beginning. He didn't expect to meet someone his first week. He especially didn't expect her to look at him as if she saw more than the surface. Slow conversations. Over the next few days, they ran into each other again. First at a small coffee shop near King Street. Then at a farmer's market. Then, almost suspiciously, at the beach again. Are you following me? Clara teased. If I were, I'd have chosen somewhere less sandy, Ethan replied. They started walking together in the evenings. Charleston at dusk felt cinematic. Gas lamps flickered. The sky turned lavender over the harbor. The air carried hints of magnolia and salt. He extended his hand. Ethan Walker. Clara Bennett. His handshake was steady, warm. I just moved here, he said. From Chicago. Chicago felt far away from Charleston's humidity and slow drawl. What brings you south? She asked. Work. And maybe, something quieter. She laughed softly. You picked the right place. Charleston moves at its own speed. He glanced back at the water. That's what I'm hoping. The weight he carried. Ethan Walker was 32, a civil engineer specializing in coastal infrastructure. He had accepted a position with a development firm working on restoration projects along the Carolina coast. But that wasn't the whole story. 3 years earlier, he had been engaged. 2 months before the wedding, his fiancée died in a car accident during a rainstorm in Chicago. That was when she saw him. He stood at the edge of the pier, hands in his pockets, staring out at the water as if trying to decode it. He wore a simple white shirt rolled at the sleeves, dark jeans, and an expression that didn't quite belong to someone on vacation. Tourists usually looked excited, curious. He looked burdened. Clara didn't mean to stare. She adjusted her camera lens instead, pretending she was focused on the skyline. He turned suddenly. Their eyes met, and something shifted. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't dramatic. It was recognition, though she couldn't have explained of what. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, nodding toward the harbor. Depends on what you're looking for, she replied before she could stop herself. His mouth curved slightly. And what are you looking for? Clara hesitated, still deciding. Click. Another sunrise captured. Photography had once been a hobby. Now it was survival. After her engagement ended 6 months ago, Clara had quit her corporate marketing job and returned home to Charleston. She told everyone she needed a reset. The truth was she needed to remember who she had been before someone else's expectations reshaped her. The town hadn't changed. The old church bells still rang downtown. The cobblestone streets still echoed with carriage wheels. Tourists still lined up for pralines and ghost tours. But Clara had changed, and she wasn't sure whether that was a good thing. The stranger at the pier. Later that afternoon, Clara walked along the wooden pier stretching into the harbor. Shrimp boats bobbed in the distance. The air felt thick, warm, and alive. Part 1. Where the Ocean Keeps Secrets. Setting: Charleston. The Atlantic always sounded older at dawn. In Charleston, South Carolina, the ocean didn't crash so much as breathe, rolling in and out with the patience of something that had seen centuries come and go. The pastel houses along Rainbow Row caught the early light, glowing faint peach and blue. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, and gulls circled lazily above the harbor near Waterfront Park. Clara Bennett had grown up believing that love was like the tide. It would come in whether you were ready or not. At 27, she no longer believed that. She stood barefoot on the sand of Sullivan's Island, camera hanging at her side, watching the sun lift itself from the horizon. Her hair whipped across her face in the breeze. She tucked it behind her ear absently and lifted the camera.